Okay, we are going to do an episode today on Galactic Federation. And we had a request to talk a little bit more about this one. And this excites the hell out of me. It's very fun for me. I love talking about the galactics, different things, different beings, different existence, dimensions, all the stuff. But today we are going to talk about the Galactic Federation. Now, we want everybody to know that between the two of us, this is just our own experience. This is just our own perspective. That none of this we are saying is right or wrong or exactly how it is, but to take your own truth out of this and move forward with whatever resonates is fantastic. If none of it resonates, that's okay too. And you're welcome to skip this whole episode if it's not up your alley to listen to. But we wanted to do this one because it was requested, and I am happy and excited to give what our experience is when it comes to the Galactic Federation. Now, I know Dayna's already said, I don't know how much I'm actually going to be able to contribute. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. You'll be able to, I think, more than you know. But the first reference that we want to just talk about first off is like the idea of what the Galactic Federation actually is. So the Galactic Federation is known as, so it's hard to comprehend a little bit because we're simply on an Earth that has governments, and there's a lot of corruption going on in a lot of these governments across the world and a lot of mistrust happening now. But I wouldn't say the Galactic Federation is exactly the same kind of thing, but it has a type of ruling for the universal laws to help, govern in a way with all beings that exist in the universe. And also when it comes to Earth, what happens here with along with the free will, and depending on beings that maybe want to come in and help us, they actually do need to be directly given permission to do so. A lot of them are not allowed to just come in here and do whatever they wish. So, there's always that line of free will that exists as well. And what the Galactic Federation does is to help keep the peace and understanding and clarity between all beings so that, if one needs help, maybe they have knowledge to help another from this part of the universe, or they know others from another universe that can help in different ways. So it is a type of governing body, but not in the same way that we would probably use as government here. I would say closer to what that actually does out there. Think of it as like on a love scale where it's very peaceful. There's no war. There's nothing like that. That's not what they're there for. They're there to truly help in whatever way they can from their own knowledge. And yes, a lot of them are appointed in a way from their own race, if you want to call it, or own type of being, from their own planet or stars, to be a part of this, to be able to help giving, what maybe issues are coming up with that planet or star. And they do have councils, usually of similar beings, that will come together and talk and then bring that forward to a larger council. It's like what they just showed me was like the big room, where it feels like, and again, it's not set up like a courtroom or anything like that, where maybe some visions have maybe popped into people's head of what that would look like, but it's like this room with a big circular table, and they do kind of come together to talk about the things and to see where and what is going on and be able to help each other in whatever way that looks. So that is from my knowledge and understanding, because there is a being that has actually directly contacted me, a Palladian out of the Galactic Federation and from one of the councils, that has come and spoke to me and shown me things. So this is again coming from my own experience. It's not to say this is right or wrong, but hopefully does that make sense to you? Anyway, I'm going to bounce it off of you because you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have touched on before how we can perceive things through various lenses of our own psychology. And so as you're having visualizations or trying to put this together or tuning into what it looks like for you, just understand that you're likely having a perception coming through various lenses of your psychology. So it might be a little more like Hollywood-ish for your vision, or, who knows what you've seen in the past or referenced or thought of, and just know that your brain is that search engine. And so it's pulling forward from that lens of psychology, from that experience, to try and help you make sense of what you might be seeing or perceiving in that moment. And so just know that this is why we say it's like based off our own experience. It's our own lens, our own perception as we translate the information and the energy. Know that it always probably falls somewhere in those lines, but it might not be exact. And that's kind of why we do the best we can to describe what we're receiving. And not using a lens of a Hollywood, Star Wars, or whatever else, right? But just be cognizant of what's coming up for you as you're listening to this, and being aware of like, where am I pulling this visualization from, or where am I leaning with as I'm seeing this. The important thing is just to be aware of it. It's not, again, it's not right, wrong, good, bad, and different. It's just like, that's how our brain works and how it works for us. So take that into consideration. Like, I don't know, the way you described it, it felt a little bit like Knights of the Round Table almost, right? And then there's this other extreme of like the Star Wars, where they're all on their own little floating little pods, and they come down and come together and talk, and then they go out, right? So it's like, what scale does it exist on? And it's probably somewhere in between those two sides of the spectrum.
And it can be a little bit of everything too,
Yeah.
right? Because people, our world is quite so small. Like we're a pinprick in the universe, so it's like to understand and recognize that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of different places that a Galactic Federation is going to congregate in, or, I'm sure they have lots of different locations. You also have to remember they're not all physical beings, meaning they don't need to all congregate in the same exact place to be able to communicate either, which is a whole nother level. And I mean, honestly, you guys, don't try and understand this all from a conscious human perspective, because it is not going to make sense. And Zahara's laughing because they're like, it's not really relevant anyway that you make sense of all of this
Yeah.
for your experience here. But we understand sometimes it's nice to have some information about what kind of maybe some of the structures are out, in the universe. But when it comes to the galactics, it is very different than what actually is existing here on Earth. It is not the same kind of space. It's not the same frequency. Now, at the same point in time, let's talk a little bit about the Star Wars and the Star Trek, though, because honestly, probably the first recognition I kind of got from understanding that there was a Galactic Federation was this inkling that I kind of heard it somewhere else, right? But didn't go into detail, nothing like that. I thought, that's kind of fascinating. I wonder, what that kind of looks like, or how that kind of might work. Same kind of probably questions why you're here listening now. But and then I had this notion from my team, all of a sudden just bring up Star Trek. They're just like, look at Star Trek. And I was like, what the hell about Star Trek? Like, yeah, it's a show, right? But then looking into it, I started to realize that when I looked into it a little bit more and actually brought it into meditation, because I was like more curious now, because I was like, okay, well, why'd you bring up Star Trek? And they brought up Star Trek for the reason being was like having a multiple different beings on the same ship working together in certain ways. Now, the missions that they probably go and do in Star Trek are not necessarily going to be what the Galactic Federation is doing, but that same type of setup on different ships that they could have across the universe, different collectives or councils working together in those ways. You got Spock, who reacts and works one way compared to, the captain in other ways, so it's like there's all these differences in Star Trek, but you can see how they all come together to work together, and they all recognize their own abilities, their own knowledge, and something similar to that. Now, big difference with Star Wars. Star Wars is not quite the same thing as what the Galactic Federation is. The Star Trek was a reference towards what the Galactic Federation more so was when it came to Star Trek, rather than Star Wars. I do believe Star Wars has validity to it, to what likely goes on out in the universe, but again, not in so much of that physical sense necessarily, because not everything else out there is physical like we are as a being here. So just different references, but I can feel the giggles happening again, because Sahara's like, well, you guys, all your ideas don't come from nowhere when it comes to these things.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I feel like that's probably the best way I can describe that. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that one.
No, I was just being reminded of like how it came in for me, and it's just interesting. I mean, it makes sense because of how I be, how I tune in, how I operate, how I receive, all of that. And so it was just like during my awakening experience, which we've talked about previously, it was like, I think that's when this idea of Galactic Federation came in, and it was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Like, there's knowing, but also no need to like, I was never at a place, it was such a solid knowing that my ego didn't need to ask any questions about it. Like, there were no thoughts, there was no spinning. There was like, oh yeah, just like the spaceship Athena that exists out there. And like, it's just these knowing of these things that are truth and have always been truth for me. Like, I don't expect anybody else to hold them as truth. So I don't think I ever really, it's like all the star family stuff and the things we talk about. It's just so integrated. It's who I am. It's embodied. It's like, this is my truth. And it just is. So for me, that is how it was with the Galactic Federation. Like, oh yeah, it's a group of beings that come together to uphold universal laws for the good of all, and they bring wider perspective and da 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 da. Right? Like, it was just
I feel the
it
same way. I
yeah.
definitely accepted it probably way faster than most people would have. And then there was me the one day where this Palladian comes into my meditation one time and says, "Yeah, I'm from the Galactic Federation Council, and I want to bring you up to this space in the astral planes and have a conversation." And I remember saying to my mom one day, "Oh yeah, I had this Palladian from the Galactic Federation come visit me the other day." Like I just blurted it, right? And thank God it was to my mom because my mom was just like, "Oh, okay, cool." She didn't know what else to say, right? But it was just so normal, right? It was just like, "Oh, makes sense. Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
So
Totally."
the I don't know if we've talked about this experience on here, but you know about the experience. When I had that elf show up after like I had watched, so he's like popping in right now, and it's like, so well, what does the Galactic Federation do? What are these councils do? It's like they're keeping the energetics as clean as possible and the earth and around, like they're councils and groups that do specific things and have kind of, you know, but it's also more of like, this is my gift. These are what's natural to us. This is what it's almost like this is our job or our role, but it's not like a job or a role like we view a job or a role. It's just like, this is part of my being in existence, is in this elf case, going around and closing these portals and gateways that people were unconsciously and consciously opening that shouldn't be open, right? Like, um, so yeah, it just kind of, that kept popping in of like, yeah, okay, this is part of kind of by extension related to
Yeah.
Galactic Federation stuff. So it just shows the vastness
Yeah.
of like what it is and why it is and what it's doing and things like that. So
Yeah, it's again, it's not, you gotta take away the duality, because that's definitely something you can't view this as having, is the duality that exists here on Earth, because it doesn't exist outside of our Earth to that degree. So it's a place where, again, like now that I've talked about this plate and he's now popped into my field, he goes, "Oh, this is exciting. You guys are all finally talking about this now." But it is this place too where, so this Palladian that I have, spoke, it's been a while since actually I've connected with him, but he is kind of showing me too, like it's not all rainbows and butterflies, what many of you may perceive it to be, but it's more of like this neutral state of being where it is very calm, it is very loving, and to wanting to truly do what is in the greatest good of all for the entire universe, right? And so, there maybe is a planet or a star that's having problems. Like let's say, there's a planet that's run out of water, or their water source is depleting and they're needing, help to find either how to resolve that problem for that planet, or help to find something in the universe that's going to allow them to continue their race or whatever that looks like. So again, it's more on that wider basis of wanting to help everybody in whatever way that looks. And so there might be some slight disagreement, he says, between the ideas of what, could be done or how it should be done. And so that's why they all come together, is to then decide going forward what is the best option right now in this moment in time to help whatever is going on. So there can be disagreement, sure, but they're not sitting across from each other yelling at each other, telepathy or throwing energy around just because. But they can definitely have some slight disagreements on the way that they are viewing it, just simply because, again, everybody's coming to the table with their own knowledge of where they're at as a soul being or being in that experience, and coming together to try and resolve problems or challenges that might be showing up for certain places. And of course, to figure out also where everybody wants to go. Okay, so this is the bigger part of the Galactic Federation that I found rather interesting, because here on Earth, we're very linear. We're not really thinking, we've got, okay, we got here right now, and where do we want to go from here, right? And so we're constantly kind of wanting to move forward in a very particular way. Well, because it works so differently in the actual universe, what is fascinating is to see, okay, well, they're not creating a future necessarily, but they're actually figuring out what they actually want to create next in energy. So it also becomes quite an interesting aspect when you take in the creativity piece of it that they've come together to do. And so they just showed me how many scientists in a way that they have in this group as well. Their whole council that come together and say, okay, well, we've got this and this and this and this. We'd like to create or see, and doing all this and that. And again, it's just another expression of energy wanting to create in a way for it to be able to have an experience and whatever that might look like. So it's a very fascinating place, lots of different beings. And I don't know, have we talked much about the whole moon aspect of things? I don't
I
know if
think
we ever
the
actually did.
Syrians channeled something through once, but I don't think we've
I don't think
done
we've
it.
ever actually done a podcast about that. Um, so there's a whole another aspect when it comes to the moon. But believe it or not, the Galactic Federation actually often congregates within a space in the moon that actually allows them to create almost like a sacred place, I guess, for many to come if something's going on, or if they're unable to stay on their planet for whatever reason, or if they need a place to go for the time being. They're actually using the moon right now as a place for a lot of these beings to come. So there's many different ships that they use, lots of different groups, lots of different things. Now that he's like, let's talk a little bit about some of the groups, because some people have this notion that there's like this army, or there's, these soldiers or warriors. Now, that is like our definition of that is so much of the polarity that exists here on our earth. So a lot of us see like soldiers or warriors are like these battle people that are going in for war, or even if you want to view it as peacekeepers, but they're still got a gun, basically, like these things that we still have these notions that they're like something could happen. Now, their way when they say we have collectives of warriors or generals or soldier type people, that's not actually what they're there for. They're doing very particular work when it comes to the energetics, or to provide help, or whatever it is that you want to perceive it as. But it is not to create war. It is not to start or fight in that way. It's not needed. A lot of the time it's never needed. There are certain beings that exist. If something like that needs to happen, then there's actual specific beings that often will come in to gather and protect, if that's the case that's actually needed to happen. But it's very, very, very rare. And it's simply because of the factor too that there is so much. The duality here really causes us to think in a very specific way of our conscious mind. And I totally get it. That's the whole point of our experience here, is to be in the duality. But they're like, when you think of this, please do your best to try and not put that lens across what we're trying to explain to you today, only simply because it is very different and it's just a very different setup. But he's saying to me again, it's hard for us to give you visualizations of exactly what this is, because our brains cannot actually comprehend, as being human, how it actually all exactly works. But again, he's like, hopefully this kind of helps just give some description of what actually is going on. He's like, if people could actually see how many different beings and how much of the energy actually exists out here, you all would be so surprised.
Yeah.
But again, your scientists are not necessarily looking in the right places. They're looking for something solid, and they're looking for something physical. And a lot of us do not function or baseline on the physical. We are higher of a frequency, right? So of course, if you go through science or NASA, they're not going to show you these things because it doesn't exist to them. So
Well, and it's important to say, like, this has always existed. It may
yeah,
just now be coming
forever.
to your awareness or a consciousness, but it's always been here. They've always been here. They've always been around, interacting, doing the things. It's not new. It's just new to some people's awareness, and and that's okay. And it's, we're doing this to help people understand it's not yet another, like, to be fearful of it or anything like that. Like, it's always been here.
Yeah, long before Earth even ever existed, the
Yeah,
Galactic Federation already existed. So
exactly. So it's just human consciousness expanding and becoming aware, right? Like,
exactly
yay,
that.
it's exciting.
It is exciting because someday we're going to be the ones, going out there, and next thing you know, we're going to become a part of the Galactic Federation too, because they're going to want every galactic being that has the capability of travel or going through the universe in their own way to be a part of that council, because they want everybody to be involved in it. They want everybody to have a voice. So it will be one of those things where it will become normal.
It's like galactic citizenship. It's like being
Exactly.
a dual citizen in two countries, right? But this is on a galactic level.
Exactly that, and it's so funny because they kinda giggle because 'cause they're like, "Well, you already come from out here already, you know,
Yeah.
you're just having a human experience, so if you really think about it, you're already a dual citizen." But in that way of us understanding as we continue to ascend and grow and evolve here on our own earth, you know, it's pretty naive to think that we're not eventually going to be out there ourselves. And, you know, there's a whole nother conversation behind that because I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "Yeah, well, we know that there's existence of this technology on this earth already and that, you know, it's all been hidden," and yes, I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I do agree. I do feel as though that's very, very true. But that's a whole nother conversation for another time. You know, you're here in this experience right now. Let's focus on you and finding your own truth because the more truth you can find for yourself and you can use your own discernment, I promise you, you guys are going to get to a point where it's easier to move through this information out there and really discern for yourself of what's actually authentic, what's true for you, and not feeling so chaotic and confused. And I think that this has just been a great episode to expand on your thought process. Like, how do you actually feel about it? Does it actually make you freak out or fearful? And why? Why would it make you feel necessarily that way? Did you watch a scary movie once when you were a kid that just gave you that experience? And that's all you kind of have to go off of, right? So there's a lot to it, but
Yeah, and as we move forward, in the coming years and as stuff is going on, like remember, we're not alone. We're not alone in the universe and there are other wider things at play and beings and consciousness and they are here for the highest and they're here to help and yeah, nothing
they
yeah.
really are only ever here to help. And that's the thing I think I only hope for more people to recognize is the fear is not real when it comes to these beings that are here helping us. They have been literally given permission from the Galactic Federation to be here to help us. And if they were not to be here, they wouldn't be able to find us. Okay. So that's like another thing the Galactic Federation will do. We'll give her protection from maybe there's certain energies or certain things out in the universe that are just not meant to have an experience with a certain star or planet or whatever it might be. And so in which there is their capabilities. And I know it seems crazy and supernatural, and it is to some extent for us because we're the physical densest being you can get is being in the 3D. So it seems incomprehensible about certain things that can actually go on, but it is the truth. Like there's a line of protection over us. If something's not to interact with our planet, it's not going to happen. So it's just one of those divine things too. You have to think like if the universe can be set up as this absolute massive thing, and yet no planet runs into each other, no star, runs into each other. And if there's like things, and we know there's asteroids and all the things moving, but one of the wildest things that I think people forget is like it's all in a divine order of some kind because it's if you think about gravity on our planet even if gravity off by just a fraction either way, it would completely throw everything in our planet into complete chaos. Guys, we'd be floating now, or something else would change, or we'd be so dense that we couldn't even pick our feet up off the ground, right? So, and all it is a fraction of it. And so you have to remember too, like when it comes to everything outside of this planet, it is all divinely sourced in some degree. It has to be, because otherwise, it would just be absolute chaos. There would be no orbit to keep us around our own sun, so we would be floating in all sorts of different pieces and there would be no viable life to be had because if it can't be consistent then there's no way anything could survive to the degree that it has survived even on earth.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things, but hopefully if you can change your perspective or question on like why does it make you feel fearful, or so one of those things for me was like when I started to explore more of the spiritual realms, and the Galactic Federation was just like a total, oh yeah, makes sense, no problem. But there was other things that so one, certain things that you think about and you're like, ooh, and you get like a source of fear or a tingle of like, ooh, I don't know if I want to go there feeling. And it's like, I actually really had to ask myself why, like, what was my experience? Because it doesn't really make sense why all of a sudden I would just be afraid of it for right now, right? If we're coming from a place in the universe as a soul being that only really comes from light and love, what the hell is causing us to have reactions like that when we're here in this experience? It's got to be something that we've seen, heard, or took in to some degree at some point, right? So if this is something that freaks you out by talking about the Galactic Federation and some galactic things, ask yourself why and see what kind of answers you're able to come up with for yourself. And hopefully that just helps you expand and learn, not to say there's a right or wrong or you have to believe in it, but to just question yourself. see what you can feel good about believing and what does feel good, what feels fearful. And then you're going to start to learn more and more about yourself as a person too, because we've all been giving our beliefs through whatever that looks like. That's part of the reason why I think I hated scary movies. When I was a kid, I still hate scary movies to this day. There's never in a million years you're going to get me to watch one because I absolutely hate them. But it's that notion too of like setting a belief down, right? No matter what that is. And our brain could associate that in 10 different ways.
Yeah.
But, you know, like clowns. So many people are terrified of clowns, right? Good reason. There's a lot of horror movies about clowns, you know? So what has been your experience when it comes to even this stuff?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think I have a whole lot more ads about the Galactic Federation because I tried to keep it very generalized. Because obviously we could go down a rabbit hole for 10 years on, you know, all that kind of stuff. But for the ones that were interested in listening to this, let us know. Drop us a comment. Let us know if it helped you or if you would like more clarity on certain pieces or things. We'd love to keep getting, you know, we love the requests. So if there's something else that we can go into a larger topic or something that comes up, please feel free to let us know. It doesn't have to be on this. If you got generalized topics or something in your own experience, it can be very helpful if you give us those things because we're maybe able to bring up a podcast episode that can help a lot of different people with their own experiences. So we always very much thank you for the requests and comments and let us know what you think.